Hello and welcome to ABSC Monthly, a DevCentral podcast featuring contributions from David Warburton.
So I think this would be a great example where you might lock something down. Make sure we kind of tell people why we're doing it, give them a very tangible reason, specifically if there's a kind of very recent news story. And I think that will then lead to a better appreciation and less kind of resistance and frustration when people look at the various IT policies they've got.
Malcolm Heath.
That's a really good point. There is a really strong contrast between the level of sophistication that was used to gain the initial job. Relatively sophisticated, right? And it got past everybody who interviewed this person. And then moreover, the job was, if I'm not mistaken, for some sort of a software engineering role.
Megazone.
It seems like they got caught and detected because they were ham-fisted. Like you got this new laptop, and booted it up, and the first thing I started doing was loading up malware, like known malware that intrusion detection systems immediately tripped over.
And more. Strap on those earbuds and get ready for ABSC Monthly.
Hello, welcome to the next new episode of ABSC Monthly. We will be getting to the news shortly, but first we wanted to take a look at what F5 Labs has been up to lately. David?
Yeah, thanks, MZ. Welcome everyone to the new show. Again, we're flipping things on the head today. We wanted to have a bit of a deep dive on a brand new article that we've just published on F5 Labs. And rather than me do an injustice and cover it poorly, we thought we'd get the authors, Shuang and Adeolu, on the show to join us. So guys, welcome. Please introduce yourselves. I've got loads of questions, really excited to start talking about what you've been doing recently.
Yeah, thank you for the quick introduction. My name is Adeolu. I'm a data scientist on F5's threat analytics reporting team, and we're here with my colleague Shuang.
Thank you, Adeolu. Hi, this is Shuang. I'm also the data scientist from the TAR team, and we do a lot of cool things with customer closely regarding the bot defense data. And we also spend some time doing the research like the Black Friday this time. So thank you for having us today.
No, very welcome. Really, really delighted to have you on the show. As you said, you just teased the latest article that you've just put out is based on Black Friday and the kind of shopping trends. Can you just start at the beginning? Kind of tell us a little bit. This is the second year I think now we've published an article from yourselves about the trends and how automation and bots how that changes around the Black Friday period. Can you just start by giving us a bit of a background in terms of the research? Where's the data come from? How did you go about doing the analysis?
For sure, I can begin, and Sean, you can chip in as well. So this all kind of started with an open-ended question. During Black Friday or during the Black Friday period, do we see an uptick in the automation targeting retailers or retail enterprises? Given the vast amount of data which F5 collects with our bot advanced our product. We're able to analyze, billions of transactions and, actually answer that open-ended question to some extent. So that's where it started last year, where, we got that open-ended question. We started to analyze the traffic and, answer that question with an article and, just translate it into this year where we decided to do the same based on last year's data as well. Was there anything else I missed, Sean?
I think you cover the major thing, but I also want to, provide some high-level the findings that we got from this article. I think in the overall trend that we find in 2023, the legitimate customer traffic increased by nearly 47 compared to the previous year. And we also look into the malicious activity, which actually dropped a little bit compared to the previous year. So I think those are the very general trend that I want to share with the like anyone of you at the very beginning.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was really fascinating reading, actually, looking at the kind of the shift in kind of attacker and malicious kind of automation. Mm-hmm. So if I understand correctly, you're kind of comparing legitimate human users, so customers of websites, retailers in particular, and comparing those to the kind of automated, connections, the bots that operate for various reasons. What kind of bots typically are you kind of finding, attacking or connecting to retailing websites?
So this is actually very interesting, and if anyone watching or listening to this wants to check out F5 Labs, there are a lot of articles that really touch on a lot of the topics that we'll be talking about today. There's one of them refers to resetter bots. I believe another refers to scraper bots, and so on and so forth. So this is just some, or just a minute proportion of the types of bots that we do see targeting these retail enterprises. We see gift card bots, using automation in order to carry out gift card fraud. We have reseller bots. These bots want to take advantage of the massive discounts which these retailers provide on Black Friday, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I want to add a bit to that. I think we also have the analysis breakdown by the subcategory under the retailer. So we have the overview trend analysis for the whole retail industry. And we also look into the sub-industry, including grocery, the quick service, restaurants, commerce, and fashion. So we did see different type of the attacking regarding the different sub-industry. For example, the grocery website saw the bots attacking login and account registration page a lot. And then for the fashion, we saw a lot of attacking going to the gift card flow, like Jolu mentioned. So I think it's really a lot of interesting findings that you can find from the article.
Yeah. So to me, the kind of gift cards are somewhat obvious. Attackers, threat actors love gift cards. It's a very easy way for them to kind of cash out their attacks. Whether it's a scam or something else, it's like having cash, very easy to move, very difficult to trace. What would you say are the main reasons for bots and attackers going after things like registration pages? How does that benefit them?
I think I can share my thoughts first. So by attacking the registration account, they can just create a fake accounts and also get access to the database behind to steal the credential information. And other than that, we also have seen some of the attackers, they target that flow to just create a bunch of the new accounts to get the open account bonus. The activities like that, and also that could be a run of the pre-testing before they have the credential stuffing. So they first create a bunch of the fake accounts for test whatever credential that they have.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're saying that commonly threat actors will use the kind of bots and go to the user registration page, create fake accounts so that when the sales come, those fake accounts are ready to be used to actually do the kind of the scraping or scalping, whatever we want to call it, kind of essentially adding those items to the basket and trying to check out before other users can do. Got you. Okay. So you mentioned, one thing I found interesting in the report, in the article, was that you said that the number of the amount of automation has gone down slightly compared to last year. Can you talk a little bit about that? What kind of numbers are we talking about? Was it a huge kind of downturn, and was it a kind of decrease in real numbers or as a percentage of all traffic? Because you mentioned a kind of big uptick in kind of human users. So is it a case that the human users, genuine customers proportionally are now outweighing the automation, or has there been a real number decrease as well?
So I can take that question. So we saw the decrease in the real number from the automated traffic volume in 2023 compared with the level that we saw in 2022. So that was true. And also, I think other than that, we also have seen the level of the increase during the Black Friday for the automated transaction is kind of melt this time because in 2022 we actually saw a huge surge in the automated traffic. However, in 2023 that was more widely spread over time in a more extended time frame. I think that was mainly because we've seen more and more enterprises, they start their early access to the Black Friday sale. And we kind of seen that more frequently year over year. I think this is a strategy that a lot of the retailers, they want to win the game at the very beginning. Especially, I think the Black Friday discount is kind of sync up on the online store and in physical store in recent years, especially after COVID.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So would you say then that obviously, these kind of attacks, these threats are certainly a problem all year round. I think whereas a lot of people had the assumption that they had to really batten down the hatches and really defend up just in time for the sales? You're saying this is maybe more of like a year-long problem. This problem's going on all year round, regardless of the month or the time of year.
I think it depends. Excuse me. Just to go back to one of the points that Shuang mentioned earlier, when it came to our analysis of the retail space, we looked at different subcategories of retail enterprises. So we looked at grocery companies, fashion companies, QSRs, so quick service restaurants, and e-commerce. And what we noticed looking into the data is that this isn't a year-long type of problem. The type of attacks you see depended on which month we're looking at for each type of company. So for example, when it came to grocery companies, we noticed that towards the month of November, there was a significant uptick in the automation targeting the login pages. Whereas a few weeks before that, there was a significant uptick in the automation targeting the registration pages. So, we may see, different spikes here and there. You might see consistent automation, which might in some cases refer to scraping activity. But the types of attacks depends on the types of companies and the value that these attackers or threat actors think they can get at that particular point in time.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You also mentioned, you mentioned a few times as well, looking at the different industries within the kind of retail sector. You've highlighted a few. I think e-commerce was mentioned, but certainly grocery and fashion. Would you say that the different focus of automation on those industries are an indication that that industry has got a weakness in any particular defense, or is it just that they're attractive for a different reason? Why would a kind of bot user focus on grocery for a certain reason and fashion for a different reason? What are they going after and how are they doing it differently?
For sure. And I think it's the latter. This kind of brings me back to, the point, an important point when you talk about some peer benchmarking data, where we compare, a particular enterprise's automation numbers to another company, right? It depends particularly and not fully on the value, in my opinion. If you are a customer that's consistent, even after mitigation, consistently getting attacked, is because most likely actors feel as though that that with the amount of resources they're pouring into carrying out these attacks or running all these automation transactions, the value they could get would trump that significantly. What do you think, Shuang?
I agree with that. I think firstly, the nature of the business is definitely decide how whether they're attractive to the bad actors. For example, for grocery, I can see one of the reasons why they received a heavily attack from the malicious actor is because their security mechanism may be not as strong as the security protection that e-commerce customer they do have, especially for the large size of the e-commerce, because they've been working on this for several years. They do have both their in-house tool and also they have the third-party vendor to help with them to block a lot of the transactions. However, for the grocery, many of the website and the their mobile application are kind of new to be established in past few years. So I think with that said, that's one of the reasons why we see the grocery receive the I think more the higher level of the automation in past 2 years. And then for the fashion that you mentioned, I think fashion has really high value and high demand products that are very attractive to the bad actors. For instance, the reseller bots. So the attackers also have very high motivation of exploring the vulnerabilities for the industry, the sub-industry like fashion, especially in add to cart and gift card system to steal the financial gain or to gain the customer data through those flows. So yeah, I think that's also something that I want to add to what Adolo mentioned.
Sure. What about when it comes to actually having these kind of defenses in place? Do you find that attackers are, or the bots, are they put off by having kind of mitigation defenses in place? Do they alter how they try and conduct their attacks? Once things are put in place to try and detect the bots and block them.
It depends. Excuse me. We have seen a lot of cases when we analyze the traffic for a particular enterprise. where, after mitigation, over time, first of all, the automation that we see or evaluate or flag or mitigate, whichever term you want to use, just decreases over time. When we look at individual campaigns, bot campaigns, which we mitigate, in some cases, we do see, these actors stop. In other cases, we do see retooling as well, which is also another big topic in this bot space. So honestly, it just fully depends on, the cross in between the value that an actor can get and how motivated they are. That's my
Absolutely,
opinion.
it's always effort versus reward. If the effort is too much for the reward, then I'll give up and not bother. What about the differences between web and API? The world is going kind of API focused, API first. From what I understand, your data kind of shows or encapsulates bot attacks against both traditional websites and APIs, specifically mobile APIs. Is that right? Is there much difference between the two kind of application types of web and mobile API?
Sure. Would you like to touch on it?
I'm trying to think about the different trend that we observed on this platform, but definitely we analysis into this two platform in our research. I believe this year in 2020 in 2023, mobile was the key point that where we see the increase in the automation compared to the website. But I think overall, the general trend that we saw from the customer that we have protected for a long time is the mobile usually experience the less attack once they have the advanced protection in place. So I think this is due to like how difficult for the attackers to change their methodology and do the retooling to the existing version that they have. There are definitely more things they can add to the automation tool on the website. However, for the mobile, they do have usually less capability to make their tool really advanced and pass by the bot defense tool. But come back to the Black Friday. Do you have like other findings that you want to add to here?
Yeah, for sure. So there are a few things I wanted to add. So the first being usually, after analyzing traffic for multiple enterprises, you start seeing some trends, and we do naturally see a higher percent of automation on websites in comparison to mobile APIs. We saw that same trend when it came to retailers. Last year, I believe we analyzed the traffic from August up until the end of November. So we saw the same trend. With that being said, we did see some changes while analyzing the 2022 data and the 2023 data, especially when it came to mobile APIs. The most interesting, which I believe we spoke about in the article, was the shift in the attack strategies. Or which enterprises were being attacked or targeted the most. I believe in 2022, it was fashion and e-commerce, and in 2023, it was fashion and grocery. Gotcha. So one thing we can see is that, say for certain, is that the underlying enterprise or retail customer or in the sub-industry is the fashion industry. On web as well as a mobile. Yeah.
Is that, I mean, is there a kind of running theory we've got for that, why fashion's so targeted? Is it just because of the exclusivity of kind of high value, named brands and the cost of those? Why do we think that fashion is being so heavily targeted?
It could be for a lot of reasons. One of the one you just mentioned could be as well. I think this kind of goes back to some of the previous points, like the value you can get, especially when it comes to products or items that might not have a lot of stock, but might have a lot of demand. And the fact that people were able or did attempt to carry out a good card fraud on a lot of these items just to be able to sell them again in the real world for actual money, real monetary value. So there are a lot of different reasons.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I have one more thing to add to the fashion. I think scripting activities regarding the pricing and inventory is also, what we observed on the fashion allied. So many of the activities are actually from the competitor instead of, just the attacker who want to purchase the items. So I think that's also the reason why we saw the fashion has always been like heavily targeted by.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, as you said, it's easy when you talk about kind of threat actors and attacks to always think that bots are always malicious and they're always people actually attacking. And sometimes it's benign, friendly bots, and sometimes it's kind of frenemies. There's kind of competitors that just are scraping. And we've seen so much scraping activity recently with the AI bots that is just scraping for data. So it must be a huge problem. I know the articles you've done so far have typically looked back. So we've just published this one, but it's looked back at the 2023 data. 2023 article looked back to 2022 data. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to kind of look forward maybe to next year. Is it maybe a bit early to tell? What do you think might be the trends for next year, both, I suppose, throughout the year, but in terms of the kind of shopping period? Do you see kind of automation just getting worse and worse? Do you see it being kind of heavily focused on Black Friday or spread out through the year? Are tools and things changing much with the kind of bot users and bot creators?
That's a very interesting question. I think there are definitely a lot of like uncertainties and factors, we will see this year. But I think overall, it's very likely that we will continue to see more retailers are offering the early access sales, which could lead to the steadier distribution of the both legitimate and malicious traffic over the extended period of time. And this extended period may also give the attackers more opportunities to test and refine their method within a longer period of time. And also, I would say traditional bot activities such as reselling and credential stuffing, they're likely to persist, especially targeting the high demand products and the digital goods like gift card. And then I will also say retailer with the weaker bot defense who become the prime targets, our attackers continue to avoid the protected platform. So if they tested, against one of the retailer last year, but they find it's really hard to, bypass the security mechanism, they may just give up and, switching to the other enterprises for their malicious objectives. And also, I think the malicious automation this year could expect it to become like increasingly sophisticated with, compared to the past years that we saw in 2022 and 2023. But that also like mentioned one of the limitation in this article, because we only have the access to the customers that entered I5 long-term protection. So with that said, it's also like why we see the volume decreased, the volume of the automated transaction decreased from 2022 to 2024, because we definitely have effectively solved a lot of the issue, the potential threat and fraud for our customer with our bot defense tool working place for longer term. So I think if we go with the 2024 data with a lot of customers we've been worked with long time, we will definitely see the sophistication level increased gradually.
That's really interesting. So obviously you make a good point where the longer you kind of protect a customer, the more attackers are going to be they're either going to be dissuaded and go elsewhere, which will make it look as if the automation is actually decreasing, but globally, it's not decreasing. It's just they're shifting their focus to other people that maybe we're not protecting. But those that do stick around are going to, spend more time and increase the sophistication and get more and more competent tools to do the attacking.
Definitely.
Ariola, I'm going to put you on the spot. Anything else that we think, looking forward, anything that you think might change in the automation space or might change for the next shopping season next year?
To be completely honest, I think Shuang hit the nail on the head. She mentioned a lot of things I would have already mentioned. If I could add one more thing, maybe would be that fashion enterprises are going to continue to be highly targeted. But on top of that, when we look at the whole retail space, this includes not only the grocery companies, fashion, e-commerce, quick service restaurants. One thing we've seen time and time and again, looking at 2022 and 2023, is that login and registration pages continue to be the most targeted pages or endpoints across all enterprises, should I say. So, if I could give Wemi one point of recommendation for anyone, watching this or anyone in the bots cybersecurity space, it would be leading up to Black Friday to, have at least maybe either some sort of bot protection, or at least have, some sort of live team that can, quickly adjust to different metrics or forms of traffic that you're seeing coming to your pages.
Fantastic. Thank you. I was going to ask you for recommendations. I might come back to you for a few more, actually. I was a lot surprised you didn't mention AI as being an advancement that bot manufacturers. I mean, everyone's putting AI everywhere, so assuming that would be the case. But honestly, it's a question that I get asked quite a lot is, how do we see AI attacks? And, one of the first thoughts I have is, how would you detect them? Because the whole point of AI is to try and, certainly when it comes to bots, scraping, adding to cart, attacking sites, the whole point is they try and look human. And so, they're not trying to look like machines. They're going to try and blend in as much as possible.
Yeah. No, that's very fair. And honestly, like we said, or like I mentioned previously, over time we do see a lot of automation go down as continue to mitigate a lot of these actors. But we do also see the inverse, right? We see a lot of the sophistication of these bots increase. We see a lot of human interactions, which you may believe to be true, be pre-programmed by these AI bots. Some of which are like Selenium or other custom frameworks and things of that sort. In my opinion, as we continue to brief a lot of our customers, post mitigation, it's very clear that we are catching these AI bots, regardless of how well they retool or change the sophistication and things of that sort.
Fantastic, awesome. We're almost out of time. So I'm just going to go back to the pair of you again. If you have any other kind of recommendations for customers, I think sometimes I like to kind of, to try and address the so what, why should people care about the bots, whether you're in the retail space or otherwise. Do you have any kind of, just general advice or recommendations for organizations out there that might be concerned about bot activity?
Yeah, I like to share some of the recommendations that I do have. I think first thing is to, prepare for the surge in the traffic, no matter for the legitimate traffic or malicious traffic. So definitely we always see the increase in the transaction volume for this period of time. So it may cost the server down if the enterprise does not, really prepare for the upcoming sale event, and that may, just be take advantage by the attackers occasionally. So I think that's definitely very essential to every retailer. And then I'll also say strengthen the login and registration endpoints, because those are always the most popular flows that were targeted by the bad actors, no matter in 2022 or 2023. So I would say those activities will continue in 2024 as well. So just to be prepared for and another advice I can give is to maybe run another set of the rules for the preparation right before I would say the large scale comes, because when you just to deploy different set of the rules, the attackers may be just misled, and they prepare for the rules that they detected and tested with prior to the big sale. And when the sale comes, you have another bench of the threshold that may let their testing be a waste of the time, and you can successfully detect and mitigate more malicious transactions during the Black Friday.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. I think that's great advice, because it's easy to kind of assume that attackers are kind of opportunistic, but they take a lot of time. They prepare for these sales. They're doing their homework more than the actual customers. They're really preparing for these kind of sales, looking for things and figuring out how to make their bots work. Adelo, Shuang, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time in joining us for the show today. For anyone that hasn't already seen it, head on over to f5.com/labs. Their article is front and center at the top of the page. Definitely recommend, whether you're in retail or not. It's a fascinating read. So head on over there. But again, thank you both very much. We're going to take a short break for 2 minutes with the video, and then hand back to MZ for the news.
One of the things that's important to talk about with API security is the CIA triad. CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If we take a look at confidentiality first, it doesn't matter if your data is in transit, across a network, or sitting tight on a disk. It needs to be encrypted. Access controls and data masking are imperative to make sure that we don't have anything that's unauthorized that's able to hit our APIs. We also have to apply the principle of least privilege. Users and services only have access to the data that they absolutely require, that is essential for them to operate. Next, we're going to take a look at integrity in the CIA triad. It is of utmost importance that we ensure that data is not modified while it's in transit. Employing secure protocols like TLS is imperative for preventing man-in-the-middle attacks and stops general visibility to your data. We should always make use of hashing and digital signatures to ensure that when we've received data, that it's actually the data that we requested to be received. Also, authentication and authorization processes should control access to our applications always. Some common methods include OAuth, API keys, and of course, Java Web Tokens. Rounding out the CIA triad, we're going to talk about availability. Your app has to be designed for resilience. It's got to be able to handle the biggest punch that the internet can throw at it. You've got to have a robust infrastructure. Rate limiting and load balancing are paramount to your success here. You also need to have robust failover strategies put in place, whether that's site failover, server failover, application failover, container failover, whatever that is. You need to make sure that you're always able to recover from a failure. And of course, your API's got to be responsive. If it's not responsive, it's not useful and therefore not really secure.
Well, welcome back, everyone. It's a great presentation, F5 Labs. I encourage everybody to go check out that article. It's a really good one, especially as we're coming up on Black Friday this week. So it's good timing, of course. So let's jump into the news this week. I think the first thing we wanted to look at is a story out of China about using quantum computing to decrypt RSA ciphers. Anyone want to jump in first?
Yeah, this is a really fascinating one, and again, people will probably be bored of me saying this, but being the kind of resident kind of crypto nerd, it's one I kind of get quite excited about. You know, the convergence of quantum and even AI into quantum, and use of AI to kind of crack. Everyone's getting very, very interested and very worried about cracking traditional crypto. I know one of the kind of one of the topics front of mind for a lot of CISOs and security leaders is the post-quantum crypto, because ultimately, to be honest with you, it's the kind of thing I've spoken about cover time in the past. When we talk about kind of cracking crypto, we don't need to worry necessarily just about it being cracked in 5 or 10 years' time, because the point is, if threat actors out there are collecting the data now, they might not be able to decrypt it right now, but if they crack it in 5 years' time, that data may still be very sensitive and worth money in 5 years' time. So actually protecting stuff as soon as possible is really what we're after. But to rewind a little bit, so news in the month that researchers in China cracked RSA 50, I think was probably misreported about a few times, people getting quite upset, you know, with the quantum computing, I should say. And I think it took a lot of time. Some outlets got it right and tried to level set, which is, yes, this is an achievement. And obviously this kind of academic work only gets built upon and will only improve and get better. But right here and now, there's nothing to worry about. We're not running around with a hair on fire just yet. So to kind of set some context, RSA 50 is what was broken. So RSA 50 is the 50 refers to the kind of digits in the private key. So that equates to RSA 50 equates to about roughly 166 bits. So hopefully most of you remember or realize that, you know, most RSA signatures these days will use at least 1024 bits, if not really 2048 bits. So you can see we're a good few numbers away. We've got 166 bits at the moment. We need to go to 2048 really before we start panicking too much. That's a long way to go. I mean, to go from RSA 49, which is roughly 162 bits, to RSA 50, that jump from RSA 49 to 50 is roughly a factor of 1.5 to 2 times as difficult to crack. So this isn't a linear kind of scale. It's polynomial, right? Yeah. So it kind of goes up by a factor, by an order of magnitude. So again, you know, this is great, but we actually cracked RSA 47 before 2000, back in 1999. We cracked RSA 47. That was 155 bits. So this isn't necessarily kind of groundbreaking. It's not something that hasn't really been done before. But of course, what is getting people talking and worried is the fact that quantum computing was used to do this. So certainly a kind of milestone, but it's, you know, as I said, we're not all running around with our hair on fire just yet.
Yeah, quantum computing's been the bugbear Yeah, almost as long as I've been in the industry. It's like, fusion's 5 years down the road, right? Quantum
Almost
computing
5 years away.
going to crack everything in the next 5 years. I've been hearing that for a couple of decades now. I mean, yes, we are making progress. Quantum computing is more real today than it ever has been, but it is still very early days. I'm not dreading like all my stuff getting cracked tomorrow. I'm sure eventually we'll get there. Progress is certainly being made on lots of fronts, but yeah, it's just the same thing that happens. And whenever, I'm sure anybody in any specialist field has experienced this with the press. You see, if you're a doctor, you see medical stories. You're a pilot, you see aviation stories. You're in cybersecurity, you see security stories in popular press that grab a hold of one little fact and make it sound like the end of the world. RSA has been destroyed. Well,
I mean, there's many places and many times you should be using RSA in key exchanges, but it's absolutely still secure from a certificate and signing point of view at the moment. But as you said, it's not a problem here and now, except it kind of is if large enough enterprises or nation states have got secrets they want to keep for the next 20 to 30 years, then it absolutely is a problem now. And so obviously, people are starting to deploy post-quantum crypto ciphers as soon as possible, just to kind of double up to improve their risk. But I think the thing that gets forgotten about quite a lot, talking about quantum computers cracking crypto, is people keep talking RSA, and that's the easy one to go after. But it will affect Diffie-Hellman, even ephemeral Diffie-Hellman. The exchanges too. So because Shor's algorithm, the same algorithm that's used on quantum, is applicable for cracking both RSA and Diffie-Hellman. So it's not necessarily like we can just move whatever's left over to Diffie-Hellman. We'll have an equal problem for both algorithms when the time comes.
Yeah, that's a bit of an argument. I mean, we just had the first set of post-quantum cryptography ciphers approved in the U.S. from the U.S. government. And there's still work ongoing there for additional. I mean, those are basically hashes and things. So we still have more work to do there. But yeah, you're certainly seeing that now with more. We see a growing number of tickets I've actually been mentoring on for customers saying, I'm getting flagged by scanners for having weak search ciphers. And I can tell you off the top of my head, it's because you have RSA key exchange, you have SHA-1 HMAX, and you have AES CBC, any CBC cipher really, but it's always AES CBC. Cipher is enabled. So that it's always a moving target of what best practice.
That's exactly the point, yeah. And we're actually going to be working on the new version of our TLS telemetry report, hopefully early in the new year. It's been a few years since we put one out, but the point I always try and harp on about in these reports isn't just that great, you've got TLS 1.3 enabled, brilliant, you've got a 4096-bit key. It's what haven't you switched off? It's the stuff you haven't switched off, which is the problem. And so I'm really kind of curious to find when we can begin our very friendly kind of scans of the top 1 million sites in the new year. Yes, I'm interested to see which sites have got quantum safe or post-quantum ciphers enabled, but what are the ones which have those same sites still got things like SSLv3, for example?
Yeah, and I see that in customer cases when I'm helping out. People who configured ciphers years ago, and they set up and they've just upgraded the box. They keep upgrading their box, figuring I'm good, I'm upgrading. But because they have a non-default cipher string, that string gets rolled forward. And I've seen some, frankly, pretty ugly cipher strings. Like, this is bad. You don't want to be doing it this way. There's also always the danger of people who don't truly understand what they're configuring. Like, oh, I want TLS 1.2, so I'll just turn on all TLS 1.2 ciphers. There's a lot of bad ciphers in there.
Yeah, honestly, it's a kind of area of TLS that I get quite passionate about, which is almost like the human side. I think TLS, it is kind of a complex topic, with certificates and signing and key agreements and algorithms and ciphers and modes of operations. There's tons to it, and actually, for most kind of application developers and even security engineers, they just want to whack a certificate on it and be done. Yeah. And TLS and HTTPS in general it's like a moving target. You need to constantly feed and water it, constantly go back and make sure you're looking after it. It's not a fire and forget solution.
No, I remember the days when people used to buy 10-year life certificates, so they wouldn't have to worry about managing certificates, right? And now your best practice is like you should rotate your certificates like every 90 days. Yeah. And that goes back to your thing about long duration. The more information you've encrypted using the same certificates, the same values, the more information, if that ever gets broken, is now compromised. And so that's part of rotating your keys and rotating your certificates so that you don't have everything.
Yeah, 100%.
Looking at that article, the one thing that kind of made me scratch my head was not understanding exactly how much time it took them to crack 50. Like I would have loved to have known exactly how much time and go, okay, so I can extrapolate that it would have taken X amount of time for 1024 or whatever. The article was very clear that if you have beyond 1024, you are absolutely safe. No need to worry anytime soon. But time would have been a handy thing to understand there for me.
Let's move on to our next story. Security flaws and popular ML toolkits.
Yeah, so this one really caught my eye. I've been tracking a lot of recent vulnerability research that's targeting various sort of pipelines, be they ETL pipelines or CI/CD pipelines that are increasingly being used to automate and engineer a whole bunch of different solutions, including working with ML models in this particular case. This research was done by a security firm that specializes in software supply chain issues called JFrog, and they found a whole bunch of vulnerabilities within a large set of different companies' offerings for machine learning pipelines. Now, what I thought was really interesting about this is that only a couple of them actually were specific to machine learning as understood, right? What we saw instead, what they saw instead was command injection, for example, authentication and authorization bugs. They did have a prompt injection. They had incorrect privilege assignments. They had the whole raft of like typical web application security bugs. I mean, it almost reads a little bit like a subsection of the top 10 from OWASP here.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring this one up mainly just to say, just because it's got ML in the name doesn't mean it's going to be entirely prompt injection or model poisoning or any of these other things that we think of. You can certainly write a lot of bugs into your software that are the same bugs we've been looking at for decades, right? So it's a really excellent set of things. I think it's about 6 or 7 different CVEs issued against these, ranging from 8.8 CVSS, which Megazone, is that high?
That's high. 9 and up is a critical. So
yeah,
so it's just about there.
All the way down to 6.5 here. So I would urge our listeners, if your organization is deploying any kind of pipelines to help automate and engineer your solutions, treat them with the same level of importance that you would, any other web-based technology or really any technology in your environment, and subject them to the same level of testing that you would those other things.
This is it's such a little pet peeve for me. I enjoy talking about it a lot, but it kind of drives me mad. It seems to be every time we come out with a new protocol, a new bit of hardware, a new whatever widget, APIs, ML. I presume it's the kind of the rush to adopt. No company wants to be left behind or to not get any advantage. So people are kind of rushing to deploy stuff, and it's always the basics we forget. And so often those basics are authentication and authorization, just like this, the absolute most basic tenets of security. It's like, should you have access? Can you access? You authenticate, and should you have access to this particular bit of information? It always seems to be those kind of things that they just get forgotten about so long. I was talking a lot recently about API security breaches, or API breaches, I should say. And I think the top 4 causes of breach were all to do with authentication and authorization. Yeah. So it's kind of a shame, just as an industry, it doesn't matter what comes out new, we just seem to rush to adopt it and seem to forget those basic requirements every time.
Yeah, people working on ML, you're focused on the ML part and all its capabilities, but it's another interface into your system. If it's accessing other information, it's not its own little sandbox. It's another way, and we've seen other instances too where people have been able to trick AI ML programs into making system calls, things in the back end that it's just a complex system that it's not protected against. It hasn't been sandboxed out.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking of ML, Aubrey, you've got something to go back to, right?
Yeah, actually, I brought a piece of news this time around as well. Last week marked the brand spanking new 2025 version of the LLM Apps Top 10 from OWASP, a project which I think most of our listeners know if they've heard the show before. I'm involved in, been fairly heavily involved in. So I am going to put up a graphic here just so we can sort of see what the differences are. And I'll describe it, of course, for anyone who's just listening to the audio only version of the podcast. So the differences really are, I mean, prompt injection is really still going to be number one. It's something that it's not a patchable flaw. Really, it's actually something that's desired in most language models that I've seen, because it's got to mimic kind of the usefulness of the human brain. So I don't think that's going anywhere. Prompt injection will still be there, and these models can be fooled. So it's just a way to remind you to put guardrails on. Sensitive information disclosure has popped up a little bit, and another notable move up for me is well, actually two: supply chain and excessive agency are two things that I have talked about for quite some time, almost ad nauseum at times. And those two, I think, are really, as we understand them better, it's kind of clear to see that, boy, if you can access, elements of the underlying components of the application, things like, let's say if you have, system agency and are able to kick off things like pings or, any sort of sweep attacks, things like that from a command line. Those kinds of things are not good. And of course, supply chain. We've talked a lot about supply chain security for the past couple of years on the podcast. So nothing new there. It's just AI's got the same sort of vulnerabilities, just in many, many more places. Another notable thing, we did have insecure plugin design, which got moved into supply chain, as most of the attacks that we saw. I mean, plugins, right? That's supply chain, whether it's a free plugin or not. Really, that was one of the ones that we sort of noticed after the version 1 came out, going, maybe we should have included that in supply chain. So we did this time around. And model theft is also part of unbounded consumption, which you might notice, if you're able to actually see this, is the same color as model DOS. So we took model DOS and said, look, there's more than just volumetric, or in the majority of model DOS cases, being able to trick the LLM into overrunning its GPU resources. That's a real common way to model DOS something. Once the GPU's out, then we've got a situation where you've got a hurt application for sure. But this is expanded to include things like denial of wallet, which I think people who run the cloud agreements for most major companies, I'm sure, are very familiar with, right? I mean, if we got something that can say some behavior ends up kicking off inference build outs, right? That's one. So all of a sudden, your cloud environments in Azure and AWS are suddenly building instances like crazy. You're going to end up paying for all those. So that is also included in unbounded consumption. There are two new elements here, LLM 07 and 08. So 07 is system prompt leakage, which is a serious attack as well. Anytime you can get underlying information from the system that that the model exists on, yikes, that could be big trouble. And of course, vector and embedding attacks that's a new one. Ever since RAG became sort of a thing, retrieval augmented generation, for people that don't know RAG out of the gates, that really was it. It was clear that there were new attacks that could be aimed at any sort of embedding technology. Embedding would be where you say your model goes out and it has to find new information. It grabs new data and embeds that into the initial query that it took. So that is kind of rounding out the brand new stuff. So anyone who wants more information can, of course, go to genai.owasp.org.
It's fascinating to me. Sorry, Aubrey. I just kind of so eager to get in, but you look at these lists of kind of top 10 potential issues, and so many of them are basically the same as the op web top 10, albeit with slightly different words and vernacular and kind of phrasing, but they're all kind of the same. It's input standardization, output standardization, authorization, rate limiting. It's all a very, it's a brand new world living in. AI, ML, exciting, but same old problems.
But it's the how it gets done that's really different. So they end up being kind of the same attacks, but how they happen, that's that is the fascinating part. But you see the same thing. There's a lot of overlap in the ML top 10 and the API top 10 and the the what do you call it, the mobility top 10 as well.
Yeah, I was happy to hear you mention that sort of attack against the the wallet. I think attack against wallet was also used for something to do with cryptocurrency, perhaps at some point in time. But the definition that you offered has been something that I've been trying to talk to people about for quite some time.
Yeah.
The ability to just even mildly increase your competitors' cloud spend over time, over a year or two, might be a significant advantage and may not actually be noticeable, depending on how good their governance is of their spend. I'm fascinated by that. We so often think of the kind of attacks that you can do as just being like, well, I'm going to go steal this thing, or I'm going to exfil this data, or I'm going to knock these servers down, or whatever. But that kind of long-term, sneaky, frankly, additional consumption of resource angle, I think that's just fascinating.
That's we felt the same way. That's why we changed the name of it to unbounded consumption rather than something to do with denial of service, because I think denial of service carries certain connotations. You know?
Yeah, it really depends on what your goal is. Like you said, like doing this sneakily to a competitor or something, like it's denial of business. It's the way to, if you can hurt someone's ability to remain a going concern. And I think that's one of the reasons we saw this irrational exuberance about the cloud a few years ago, right? Everything's moving to the cloud 100%, and no one's going to be on-prem anymore ever. And we saw a lot of backlash from that now when people got their bills from AWS and Azure, and they realized that dynamic scaling also means your bill scales. And so there's been now going back. Now the big thing is hybrid. Some things that make sense in the cloud go in the cloud, but there's still a lot of on-prem. And there was always security issues and things too. A lot of the banks and medical things weren't going cloud just because the information controls. But we've seen a lot of that being budget driven too, is that the cloud became very expensive. Okay, let's move on. I think we have one more story we wanted to look at. It's a perennial that comes back over and over again, I think, is Internet of Things, the Internet of Terrible Things, being turned into residential proxies. Since everything in our life seems to be a computer these days and is network connected.
So I'm super excited about residential proxies. Again, I don't know if I should say excited. I think they're really, really interesting.
They are.
Obviously, attackers have been owning boxes all over the world and using them as proxies forever, right? I mean, like you go to any halfway decent film that has a hacker in it, and he's bouncing through 7 different proxies or whatever, right? So, I mean, this is not a new concept. What is kind of interesting about this, though, is that these are actually, at least in some cases, commercial services that you buy the proxying from, but also you can participate in. So you load an app on your phone, and sometimes it's an app that is pretending is maybe doing this in addition to whatever it was that it was meant to do. But sometimes it's actually just literally like, if you let us use your phone, we'll pay you a little bit of money. And people are going for it. And so what this ends up meaning is that now I as an attacker, or really, I mean, there's probably a few tiny little semi-legitimate use cases maybe, but I can go to these sites and get access to gigantic networks of proxies coming from residential IP address blocks, which means my traffic looks way more normal to whoever I'm going out and touching than it would have if I was doing it from a cloud resource or doing it from a bunch of servers that I owned or whatever. So this actually does get around an awful lot of sort of
Oh, yeah.
IP-based blocking and IP reputation defense layers. And I think that's super neat. So in this particular case, this particular threat actor used flaws to just own thousands of Internet of Things devices and
Right.
turn them into essentially residential proxies. Didn't seem that hard to do, sadly.
Yeah, it's not even small names. I mean, you see stories about this all the time. Lots of times it's like random, new brand names you never heard of, but a smart light bulbs, whatever.
Right.
But these are like Cisco, Linksys, Netgear, Western Digital, Zyxel, like established industry names who are making devices for the home. I think a lot of times the same attention to cybersecurity isn't paid for these cheap, quote unquote, the home devices. You see this with happening with home routers, with security cameras, with and alarm systems, any kind of these internet connected systems. Oh yeah, smart plugs. Yeah, I've got a few of those in my home too.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually see this kind of traffic all the time in our sensor intel series. The top targeted CVEs that we see frequently are routers, are some of the things that you just mentioned, MZ, right? It's security cameras, it's any of that kind of thing. So there's just massive amounts of scanning for IoT devices all the time.
I was going to bring up the Central your Sensor Intel series, actually, Malcolm, because as you said, we kind of quite often see the top CVEs being exploited are typically those for home IoT devices and routers in particular. We had a massive spike. I want to say February, March kind of time, like a huge. I think it was don't quote me, either D-Link or Linksys, I think, and some Netgear. The one in particular was just going through the roof. And typically we kind of see these scans for various kind of weaker devices, which we often attribute to the building of DDoS botnets. But it's equally as likely and increasingly likely, I think, going forward, that these are going to be residential proxies that are launched, as you said, to hide nefarious behavior.
Yeah, we see this with a lot of devices, especially home devices going out of support. I wrote This Week in Security just past couple of weeks. D-Link had one that was a critical 9.2 flaw in a bunch of NAS devices, like home NAS. Some of it was home, some of it was industrial. I can't remember all. But these devices are all out of support. And they're not getting any updates anymore, right? But people still use these devices. I'm sure I have devices in my house that aren't getting firmware updates anymore. I mean, how do people have smart TVs? How long do you keep a TV? How long is that vendor going to be providing software updates for that TV?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing legislation from around the world kind of come out that's slowly mandating things like basic security, no default passwords, automatic over-the-air updates, that kind of stuff, even with home routers, which is great, routers. But these things, they're not going to be widely deployed in the next few weeks. So as you said, MZ, people are going to have these devices sat around for years and years to come, just like the TLS problem. It's not what's new and great and what some people have got. It's all the legacy, all the old, the long tail of those old devices that get left around the internet for decades in all likelihood.
Yeah, for a lot of these home users, you're not going to know if your device is compromised unless the hacker does something stupid, like makes your light bulbs flash on and off or something, right? But they're mostly people who are doing these botnets, creating these proxy networks, are using them quietly. And so you just a little bit of traffic trickling through, so you're just a patsy.
And if your internet connection at home goes slow, you just blame your ISP or you blame everyone else down your street on the internet. You don't necessarily think, oh, I've got a compromised device that's being taken for a run in part of a DDoS botnet or a
and honestly, I mean, these days, at least for a lot of the US, we have gigantic bandwidth coming into our houses, right? I mean, I've got gigabit fiber.
Me too.
That's getting more and more common. I don't use more than 10% of that most of the time, right? So how am I even going to notice if it goes from 10 to 15% utilization?
Yeah, how many people like logging into their home router and looking at device utilization charts?
Exactly, right? Yeah,
a geek to be doing that. I've done that occasionally, but I'm not your average end user, right? So, if you thought, why is my light bulb passing megabits of data? You might be like, okay, well, something weird is going on. But for most people, it's plug and play. They set things up, and it just they use auto configurations and things, and it just doesn't work, right? As long as it keeps working to their knowledge, anything else that's happening is out of sight.
Exactly.
And it's hard to block because what are you going to do? Block all of Comcast NetBlock? You cut off.
Yeah, you can.
You cut off all your normal customers if you do that.
It kind of made me wonder if maybe a DNS sinkhole or something like that would be, something that I want to put up in my house to stop that. Because every once in a while, I'll see like these little home plugs, right? That sort of thing. All of a sudden, I see an IP address in my firewall logs or whatever. Why is that going to China right now? What? I didn't do anything. I didn't trigger
I love the idea. I ran Pi-hole at home for I think a few months, and I was having a great time blocking all the adverts on my Samsung TV. and then I couldn't install any more apps because the same domains were being used to serve apps to the TV. So I think you have these problems, and that's like going to be a tiny percentage of IT pros out there that deploy this stuff. Oh, yeah. But it just seems too convoluted, honestly, and too prone to failure for most people to implement, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, any last thoughts before we wrap things up here?
Yep. I think just encourage everyone to head on over to f5.com/labs again for more kind of research or work. We've got our predictions article coming out soon, so I'm looking forward to foreshadowing the doom and gloom of things to come for next year.
That's great. Yeah, and also on our DevCentral, there's a security insights area which has content from both F5 Cert and F5 Labs. So that's a good place to check out. And I think, Aubrey, you got something to play on the way out of here, right?
I do. See you guys next month.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.
So when we say authentication and authorization, what's the difference here? Let's take a look at authentication first. This is the process for verifying identity. This can be done through a number of methods. OAuth, API keys, Java Web Tokens are good ways to do this. Of course, MFA can be valuable here and stands for multi-factor authentication. On the other hand, authorization is about granting permissions. Once you've been authenticated, what are you actually allowed to do? This needs to be stated explicitly somewhere. Role-based access is an excellent way to take care of managing authorization in an organization. An interesting way that OAuth helps out here is by providing scoped access tokens, which limits the time for access to make sure we don't unintentionally leave a resource exposed for longer than we want to. When looking at auth and auth, we've got to consider some best practices. And when taking a look at best practices, we always want to make sure that we consider both authentication and authorization. So what to do here? Always use HTTPS. Never ever use unencrypted hypertext transport protocol. It leaves all of your data open for bad actors to consume. Also, you've got to make sure everything is up to date on the latest patch levels and revisions of software. These are easy ways for bad actors to gain access to your application through your API.
Thanks for checking out ABSC Monthly, a DevCentral podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. And if so, please consider clicking like, subscribing, or even writing a review. Don't forget to check us out next month and every month. Available on all major podcast platforms, as well as YouTube. We'll see you next month.